Welcome to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury.
Welcome back to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury, the show that helps individuals and small business owners fight back when the IRS comes calling. Lance Drury is a seasoned tax attorney who's been defending clients for over 20 years with one goal in mind: protecting what matters most. I'm your host, Evan Mack, and today we're talking about a mistake that costs people thousands every year, and that is filing late. This is the cost of filing late. What happens when you miss IRS deadlines? Lance Drury, sir, welcome back. Welcome back.
Good to see you, Evan. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure is always mine, sir. Lance, most people think IRS punishes people just for not paying, but what actually happens when you don't file on time?
Well, this is one of the biggest mistakes people make. They prepare their tax returns. They see they have liability. They don't want to send it in because they owe money and they can't pay it. But guess what? That's a huge mistake because the IRS is going to tack on a failure to file penalty, which is 5% of the raw tax per month. For the first 5 months, it maxes out at 25%. So if you got a few years of unfiled returns and they've been filed late, your liability is $50,000. Guess what? That just went up $12,500 to $62,500. And we're not even talking about the failure to file penalty or the failure to pay penalty or interest yet. So it's a huge mistake not to file your tax return, even if you owe. So, you got to get those returns prepared and filed on time.
You just kind of mentioned it, but can you tell the difference between the failure to file and the failure to pay penalty? What's the difference?
Well, the failure to file penalty is that you're not filing your return on time. The failure to pay is that you're not paying it when it should have been paid. So even if you file the return on time and you don't incur a failure to file penalty, but you don't pay the liability, you're still going to be taxed on the failure to pay penalty and interest from April of the year that it was due. So, yeah, and I probably said this before, Evan, when we got together, but if you and I charged what the IRS charges for penalties and interest, they'd lock us up.
They would. They would. They would. But how steep are these penalties, though? You kind of talked about it a little bit, but how fast do they grow? You know what I mean? Because I think people
Well,
don't.
again, the failure to file penalty is 5% a month for the first 5 months. The failure to pay penalty is 0.5% of 1%, and so that goes on until the thing is paid in full. Now, if you have an agreement, the failure to pay penalty still is present, but it's cut in half. So it's 1/4 of 1%.
I always think when people think about these penalties and these fees, I think people always think the IRS is going to come knocking to your door and like take everything, take the dog, take everything. But if someone hasn't filed in a few years, should they be more afraid of those penalties or that potential of the IRS like literally coming to their doorstep?
Oh, I've had people that hired me because an IRS revenue officer came to their door and they didn't know
That's
that
crazy.
much. And I even told him, I said, it's not worth your while to hire me over $9,000 given my fees. And they said, we don't care what your fees are. The revenue officer scared the holy living hell out of them. And they said, we never want to get close to the IRS again. We want you to take care of it. And so we do that. But you don't want to get to the point where a revenue officer is coming out to your house because they're just going to intimidate you. They're going to try to get you to talk. They are not your friend. It's like talking to the cops if you're charged with a crime. It's never good to talk directly to the IRS.
But well, how does it get to that point though? How can that actually happen? They come going to your address, knocking on your door, and you speaking to them. When can it get to that point?
Well, if you don't file your returns, that can happen. The other thing that can happen is if you've got liability, or if they think that you've fraudulently filed your returns or you're engaged in that kind of activity, you can get an IRS agent showing up and it could be referred to criminal investigation. So, in none of those instances do you want to try to do that on your own. We had a guy several years ago. We still have him. It's a collection case now, but he was under criminal investigation because he took all these business expenses, and lo and behold, he didn't have proof for any of them. In fact, his accountant came all the way to Missouri from Houston, Texas to talk to me, and he said, "Well, this is just what the guy gave me, so this is what I put in there." And it was hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax liability. But I think it was a miracle almost, but we got him out of being charged criminally with the IRS, which surprised even me that we were able to accomplish that.
You touched on it a little bit, but what kind of interest does the IRS add on top of these penalties?
Well, the interest rate varies. It's tied to the prime rate, so it changes periodically. It's probably somewhere around 3% up and down. The interest rates are higher now, so it's probably a little higher than what it's been in the past.
It's more. It's not different state by state, right? Kind of the same thing.
No, no, no. This is all federal, so the interest rates are going to stay the same. All of this. That's one of the beauties of being engaged in this type of work is that I'm only licensed in the state of Missouri as an attorney, but because the IRS is federal and because I'm an attorney, I can automatically practice before the IRS, and that's just not in the state of Missouri. I can take on people who owe taxes to Uncle Sam in any of the 50 states.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, are there situations where the IRS will waive penalties for filing late? Can that ever happen?
If you go to U.S. tax courts, you can get those penalties for filing late waived. I'm not going to tell you, it seems it's a little harder now to get penalties waived in U.S. tax court than it had in the past. But you almost have to go to U.S. tax court to get that to happen. There is another avenue, but it's much harder. You got to show reasonable cause. So your best bet, if you get that, and if you can get to U.S. tax court, you need to go there to not only get the failure to pay waived, but also the failure to file penalties waived.
Mm. So, what's the difference between filing late with a refund versus filing late when you owe money?
Well, here's the big thing about the refunds. If the tax return is more than 3 years old from the date the tax return was due, guess what? You're not getting that refund and it's not going to be applied to any tax debt. It goes to zero.
Ooh.
So if it's more than 3 years old, forget about seeing that refund or having it applied to any other tax debt. It doesn't matter. It could be $10,000. And if it was filed from a 2019 return, it goes to zero. You don't get the refund, and it's not going to be applied to any tax debt. So that's another reason why you want to file on time.
So they don't apply that to the debt that you owe.
No,
What do they where
not
does
if
it go?
it's too old. It just reverts to zero. That's their
Oh
rules. Now,
God.
now if it's less than 3 years old from the date the tax was due. So for example, if you filed 2023 and you were supposed to file it in 24, but you just recently filed it and you were due a refund, you would still get it or it would still be applied to your debt. But that's because it's within the three rules of needing to be filed. But if it's older than 3 years, from the date the tax return was due, it goes away. There's
Wow.
no refund, there's no application to any other tax debt.
So what about somebody that's embarrassed to or afraid to come forward about all this stuff? How do you help them start making it right?
Well, you gotta pay the piper. You gotta come do it. It's a crime not to file your tax returns. I can't advise anybody ethically not to file their return. But what I can do is you only need to file the last 6 years tax return to be compliant with the IRS. And when I tell people there's three rules if you don't hire me, one of those rules is don't hire an accountant. They're great with the numbers, they're great at what they do, but they dabble in these problems. And I have seen this happen a lot, is where there's unfiled returns back to, let's say, 2016, and the accountant says, well, you need to file them all. That's not true. And so if you do file them, if the IRS has never filed a substitute return for you because you didn't file, and you don't file the return, your liability is zero. And at this late date, the IRS is not going to go back to 2016, 2017, or 2018 and file a return for you. So it's a huge mistake, if there's no liability on the books, to file a return with the IRS if it's that old. Now, you may have to prepare the return, because you can't prepare most states' returns if you haven't filed the IRS return first. You don't have to file it, but you got to prepare the return in order to prepare the state return. But just don't file it. You may have to get it prepared, but that doesn't mean you have to file it if it's that old, because I've seen accountants, particularly for self-employed people who never made estimated tax payments, they put tens of thousands for each year on the books for their client that didn't need to be there. In fact, we got a call from somebody the other day, and their accountant just recently had them prepare and file returns all the way back to 2016. So a lot of their liability didn't need to be there because the accountant went all the way back to 2016 and filed those returns. Huge mistake.
Do you think that's is that more so in your opinion because of not wanting to pay fees, or thinking that because an accountant's good with numbers, they're good with tax stuff? Like, what do you think that attributes to why people kind of go that route?
Yeah, I think that's the reason, that they think that, they're an accountant, they're able, and accountants are like attorneys, they can automatically practice in front of the IRS. And I'm not saying that all accountants are that way, but just think about it this way. 90% of what accountants do is tax preparation. It's not dealing with the IRS. We're solely a tax resolution attorney, and an attorney that was in other fields would have the same problem. So that's all we do every single day. And in the old days, I would spend 15 hours a year keeping up with this stuff, continuing legal education, because that's what was mandated by the Missouri Bar. And it's still mandated by the Missouri Bar. But because this tax stuff is constantly changing, you're dealing with a government bureaucracy. All of my attorneys and myself, we spend 50 to 100 hours or more a year just keeping up on this.
Wow.
So that's why you need to hire an attorney to do this, who does this every single day.
Lance, what's your advice to anyone listening who knows they missed their deadline and they have not filed yet, sir? What do you say to them?
File as soon as possible from 2019 on, because what's required to be filed now is the last 6 years, and that's 2019 through 24. Do not worry about anything prior to 2019, and give us a call, because we can help you out with your tax problems.
Lance Drury, sir, thank you as always.
Thank you, Evan. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine, and thank you all for listening to Resilience and Resolve. If you need help dealing with unfiled returns, back taxes, or penalty relief, visit lancedrurylaw.com. Lance and his teams are here to help guide you toward a real solution. Also, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs a push to file. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.